But every time I switched jobs in my early career, the salary that I got was lower than the salary on my previous job.
Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in your career or in your personal life?
I don't second guess my experiences because those experiences have made me who I am. So I actually am very thankful to all of those experiences.
What's a common myth about your job, about VC, about entrepreneurship that you would like to bust?
That's a very glamorous job that I sit in my office all day and then suddenly somebody comes and then I sign a check and that's that and then I go home and play golf.
How emotionally draining is it?
My son asked me this recently when one of our companies was going through an IPO, and he heard me being very stressed on that call, and he said, "What's happening?" And I told him, this IPO might go up and down, and he asked me a very simple question, saying, "Papa, I thought you were a good investor." I said, "Yeah, I think I'm a good investor."
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Beyond IIMB, brought to you by the Student Alumni Committee of IIM Bangalore. My guest with me today is an alumnus of IIMB from 2007, and his career since then has been nothing short of exemplary. He has been a software engineer after graduating from RV College Bangalore, and in IIMB he interned at P&G, one of the most sought after marketing jobs even now. After IIMB, he was a consultant at McKinsey, arguably the most sought after job across B schools across the world. After being a consultant, he turned to the world of investing, being associated with Matrix Partners India, now known as Z47, and he has been associated with them for 14 to 15 years. Please welcome Mr. Vikram Vaidyanathan, the MD of Z47. Very pleased to have you, sir, on our podcast.
Happy to be here. I'm Vikram, so no sir and no mister is good.
All right, sure. So I would like to take a minute to talk about Beyond IIMB. It's an initiative by the Student Alumni Committee of IIM Bangalore, where we like to celebrate the journeys, the ideas, the aspirations of our alumni, their journeys after IIMB. And it's a platform where we dive deep into the lives of our alumni and try to find what drives them. This is a platform where we reach out to the people who walked these very corridors, who sat in these classrooms, and then went on to achieve great things in the world. And if you're a student who's looking for inspiration, or an alumni who wants to connect back with the family, or somebody who's just looking for inspiration, this is the place to be. So, welcome once again, Vikram.
I'm glad you asked me. Sounds like fun, and happy to give back.
The first question for you would be about entrepreneurship. Previously, on another podcast, you have talked about how you wanted to be an entrepreneur yourself, but you had a lot of ideas and you couldn't marry yourself to one. And being an investor has let you manage a portfolio of ideas and be an entrepreneur in many directions. So, what would be your advice, and what led you to pursue a career in entrepreneurship? What would you advise to students, and what led you to pursue a career in entrepreneurship?
Well, I didn't pursue a career in entrepreneurship, but it's something that I wanted to do, and over a period of time, made peace with the fact that I'm not going to be a great entrepreneur, but I could actually become a great investor. So let me give you a little bit of background. So before IMB, as a software engineer and building products, one of the choices I made was to leave IBM, which was my first job. I stayed there like grand total of 4 months.
Okay.
Realized that large companies were not a good fit for me, and ended up at a mid-stage startup called NDS, which was doing conditional access systems, set-top box technology, and they were getting started in India. I had the opportunity to go to Israel and work there. I think that startup energy just sort of got me. The fact that you were sort of creating something out of nothing. It was essentially a tribe against the world. It sort of just spoke to me, and then I just wanted to be part of more of those journeys. We tried to repeat that journey. I joined two people who were leaving NDS to start something, and that didn't go as well. So I had a lot of learnings on how that didn't go as well at all. But I would say that that stint didn't deter me. I really wanted to learn business at IIMB, and then try to apply that in my startup. And I used to keep bugging my a lot of my professors, RTK, who's now the director. He used to teach entrepreneurship. Janat Shah, bunch of professors. I used to keep bugging them with business plans, and they used to keep telling me that this is not good enough. I used to be very active in the NSR cell, so I was trying to keep myself active, and then I ended up at McKinsey. And what drove me to take this opportunity with my founding partner Avnish at Matrix was that I just wanted to be close to the startup ecosystem in some way. I don't think I wanted to be an investor at that point in time. I wanted to be close to the startup ecosystem and be part of startups in some way. I think over a period of time, I realized what great founders are about, and I think both in terms of one, their love and passion for one idea,
Right.
and willing to spend essentially, 10, 20, 30
The
years
entire life
just behind that pursuit of that idea. I realized that that's not me. I like more breadth. So that was one. Second, it was also that the level of, I would say, mix of capability, resourcefulness, grit, uh, and essentially drive and ambition at that level that it takes to be truly great as a founder, I realize I might not have. Right? I might be an okay founder. I think I would have done okay at most things, and I would have done okay at this as well. But what I see with some of the best founders that I backed, both, I think it's because of the first thing, which is, I don't have that that um, I would say intrinsic quality to go just stick with a level of depth with one idea for decades. Because of that, I will never be truly excellent at building that company, which is a decade long journey. Today, all of that actually goes into building Z47. So for me, that's where once I decided that to dedicate myself to the craft of investing and building Z47, which was called Matrix India then, that all my entrepreneurial energy, which is still there, just goes into building the firm.
I feel I can relate a lot to this, that it's very hard to go deep into something with all your passion, all your energy, but there are a lot of threads of ideas going on in your head that you want to pursue. So I feel a lot of our audience will be able to relate to that. So you would say that the entrepreneurial bug bit you before you joined IIMB?
For sure.
For sure. After IIMB, you showed your business plans to a lot of professors. How did your perspective about this change? You said that you realized that, okay, a lot of ideas are not working, I'm not able to go deep. But how do you feel when you took your ideas to professors? You wanted to pursue them very seriously, but professors found faults, as is their job to do so. How do you feel at that
I
moment?
wouldn't actually say the professors found faults. A lot of them actually were very helpful, and at that point of time, I was also trying to dabble in the NSR cell and so on. I don't think any of those ideas firmly took root in me, saying that this is something I really want to do.
Right.
And if I'm truly honest with myself, I would say I was in the what I call the wannabe founder or wannabe entrepreneur phase, where I wanted to start up for the sake of starting up. I was more in love with starting up rather than the problem and the consumer and the customer. Now, today, what I look for in founders are people who find a pain point in the world and then are just obsessed about solving that pain point. I would say I was more wannabe entrepreneur or a B school entrepreneur, where I was looking at markets. I wanted to start up so bad that I was looking at markets and saying, oh, you know what, I should start up in this market. There is a gap. But that's actually the wrong reason to start up. And so I'm thankful that none of those ideas took root and I didn't start up, because I would have actually messed up. Because what would make me great is to find that pain point and just say that I'm going to die trying solving that pain point, and that's not who I was at that point in time.
You talked about a funny story about how you succumbed to FOMO. Would you like to share that?
Sure. So I came into B school. Honestly, not very prepared for B school. I was at a startup, and I actually wanted to go do a master's in the US. and I wasn't getting the right school that I wanted. And I would say I got lucky in CAT, and I got into IIMB. Somebody who was the visiting professor at that time really pushed me to say, hey, you don't give up IIMB, because I was on the verge of not taking IIMB and going, and giving, GRE again and trying to do my masters again and so on. And I sort of accidentally stumbled into IIMB, and I was not prepared. Right, you come in, you have to build your CV. There's summers immediately. I didn't take any of this seriously. Right, I said, hey, I didn't take any of this seriously, and I said, you know what? I'm here to learn.
Yes.
And everybody around seems to be so worried about exams and CVs that they're not really going to enjoy this experience. And I was more determined to enjoy this experience. And I was coasting a little bit, and I'll give you the flip side of it. And so, then there was this summers process, and at that point of time, I think only McKinsey came for summers in terms of consulting.
Okay.
Nobody else came for summers, and maybe actually even they didn't come for summers. Actually, nobody came for summers. I think that was the first year that McKinsey came to IIM Ahmedabad for summers.
Okay.
And they didn't come for summers to us. That's what I remember. Maybe one of McKinsey or BCG came, but I think they didn't end up taking anybody. So it was essentially a banking day zero, and I didn't want to do banking, so I didn't apply to anyone. And then I got a bunch of these day one shortlist, PNG, and so on. And I was very happy with getting the PNG shortlist. But then there was day zero, and then I have no shortlist, where all of my friends have all of these shortlists, and they're getting suited up and going to these things. And I was sitting in my hostel room thinking, what's happening? Why, something's off with this picture. And then the placement committee called me and said, there's this bank, and we don't have. They want to meet more people. We showed them your CV, and they want to meet you. It was actually Lehman Brothers. It's a good thing I didn't go.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
So this is one of those serendipity.
That's a put a torch.
So I went in. I was not prepared at all, and I was sort of winging it. And it was a sales job. And at the end of it, the guy and I think he gave me a bunch of these sales questions, sell me a pen type questions, and a bunch of those sales questions, which I actually did reasonably well at. I can talk my way through most things. And then he gave me a bunch of these technical questions. I was terrible at them because I hadn't prepared at all.
Right.
And at the end of it, he asked, listen, do you want this job? I said, not really. And then because I'm not prepared for it, he said, it shows. And thankfully, we had a fun conversation. And I predictably I didn't get it. But hindsight, if I'd gotten it and I ended up going to Lehman, that would have been completely different life. But it did teach me over a period of time to just stay authentic to who you are and make decisions that are sort of authentic to you over a period of time. I think a lot of my batchmates who came in prepared to IIMB, I would say 50-50, but a bunch of them really knew who they were.
Right.
Really knew who they, what they wanted. And then over a period of time, really pursued that. I used IIMB to discover a little bit of who I was. And then over a period of time, gravitated to something that was sort of authentic to who I was at that time. And that has served me very well in terms of making choices down the road, on continuously making these choices which are authentic to who I am.
That's very inspiring, actually. And this thing that you used IIMB as a platform to experiment, whereas others use it as a platform to pursue deeper what they really want, that is something that I feel that is very important at IIMB, that it offers you a platform to do a lot of different things that you want to. For me also, I feel it is very relatable that I'm using it as a platform to experiment, because I keep visiting NSRCell and they have a sticky board where people keep sticking give and take requests, and I keep posting mine and noting down numbers from that.
I think the only thing I would say is that yes, explore a bunch of things, but the one thing I would have potentially done differently is push myself even harder when I was exploring things. Because often when you're exploring things, and that's not your be all end all, where I know some of my friends who said I want Goldman, right? I met my wife on campus, and she was determined that she would get into Goldman, and she got into Goldman, and that's what she wanted to do. But she gave it everything to get in. Whereas when you're exploring stuff, because it's one of those things you're exploring, you're also chilling. while exploring that.
Yes.
The one thing I would have done differently is, even when you're exploring, do it with an intensity which actually helps you grow and also tells you whether something that you're exploring is really the thing or not. That's what I would have done a little bit differently.
There's this saying that when you go to an IIM, you are set for life. Your career is set. Maybe you find your partner at an IIM, and after that, your life is set. What was your perspective going into IIM? You said that you were not prepared for business. What about other things? Were you prepared for the life at IIMB?
I don't know about life at IMB. Given that you asked about my spouse, she was a year younger, or a batch junior to me, at IMB.
Right.
She would not like that I dated her, but yeah, she was a batch junior to me at IMB, and we were in the same club together, and so we sort of hit it off, and over a period of time, I would say, became partners. And I think one of the biggest things that she's got a phenomenal career, and for herself, she was at Goldman, then she went to JP Morgan, and then she became an early employee at PhonePe. We had two boys, two kids along the way, and so both of us have had pretty crazy lives and careers. So juggling that over a period of time actually is pretty hard. And I think one of the things that really helps is the fact that we spent that common shared life experience at IMB, which sort of set us up in some ways, is always something that you can sort of fall back on, because you create a lot of new memories over a period of time, but that first shared memory is actually pretty special. On sort of life in IMB and so on, I think one of the biggest things that I learned at IMB is that I was sort of middle of the pack. After being, pretty much top of the pack wherever I went in life, whether it was school or, engineering college, or, where I worked and so on, I realized quickly, as soon as I ended up at IMB, that I was middle of the pack. And there was so many people who were incredibly high horsepower, and they coupled that high horsepower, and horsepower is IQ plus capability plus that application plus EQ, that entire horsepower, they coupled that horsepower with hard work. And those guys were just, really at the top of the back in different ways. And, me with my more, I'm going to explore everything, coasting attitude, ended up sort of in the middle of the pack. And then I had to really grind to actually get myself up into the, whatever, top 10-20% of the batch and so on. But that life lesson, actually has helped me continuously in life, which is I was determined after that nobody would ever outwork me, because almost everyone has similar, and there are people who are more gifted than everyone at all points in time in terms of horsepower. But I just said that nobody's ever going to outwork me, and that's just a lesson that I've lived by forever after that.
So this feeling of being always the middle of the pack, this I feel is relatable to a lot of students, not just at IIMB, across B schools. And a part of that reason is that there's so much to do, and a lot of students feel that they're middle of the pack by looking at their CGPA. That okay, I'm not near 4, maybe I'm somewhere near 3, or maybe even lower, and that's why I'm the middle of the pack. But how far do you think CGPA is important, and is being middle of the pack defined by your academics, or there's so many other things that you can do? We have a national level swimming player in our college. We have people who play Veena. We have people who are mountain climbers, so on and so forth. People excel in different facets of life. How do you, as a student or as anybody, make peace with the fact that you are also a part of IIM Bangalore, or wherever you are, you also belong? This imposter syndrome that I do not belong, I am not good enough. Did you feel it?
I definitely felt it, and I would say what overall, today when I sort of recruit or when I'm investing in people and so on, usually I'm looking for, I would say, extraordinarily spiky and angular profiles. What that means is that they have a tremendous spike on one dimension where they are essentially top 1% or top 0.1% in some ways, and those are the people that end up creating magic in some ways. And now different people will be spiky at different things. Now, in the business world, right, you're looking for spikes in certain dimensions, whether that is, CGPA is a measure for raw horsepower plus application, and some level of domain capability then over a period of time. And then, if let's say somebody has a tremendous spike, like you said in mountaineering, I don't know if he's a climber or a trekker, or so they likely may not be as suited for the business world, but they probably are going to excel in something, right? And then they're probably going to excel on a forward trend line, something that's related to that, right? So I think in terms of advice, I would say find your thing, right? Find whatever your thing is, and truly try, go behind that with a level of sort of excellence and commitment that really distances you from the pack on that particular dimension. As long as it is authentic to you, I think you're going to find success.
Okay, so we talked about hard work. Hard work is the key to success. We talked about passion, having these spikes in certain areas. But what are some essential skills that one needs to have to be an entrepreneur? Let's say a student at IIMB, people have to marry their current career phase, life phase, with whatever phase their idea or their business is in. What are some essential skills that anybody, but more specifically a student of IIMB or any other B school, should have to become an entrepreneur out of college or a couple years down the line out of college?
So for
Hard
me,
skills.
So for me, the number one skill that and maybe it's a few. Number one may be too strong, but the one thing that I really look for with founders is extraordinary curiosity, right? Founders are incredibly curious people. They're always thinking about what's happening in the world, and trying to figure out, like, what is a great founder. Great founder is someone who finds the world in a certain way, and they find some problems in that world, and then they can imagine this is what the world will look like after they're done with it. That's what defines great founders. But then the starting point is that incredible level of curiosity with something that's happening in the world. One of the things I find when I come and speak on B school campuses in IIM Bangalore and so on is that because there is so much happening, it's almost like people have shut out the world, so they don't really know what is happening in the world. That's actually not a good recipe for starting something, because if you don't know what is happening in the world, then you actually can't discover the problems. You can't discover the people who have those problems. You can't understand the people and your consumers or customers in a great level of depth. You can't understand who else is your competition and what else has happened before. And therefore, you can't actually start something great. And those are all the problems with my business plans at that point in time. They were too insular. They were not actually. So the first is curiosity. The second is a very high degree of resourcefulness. That is true for all founders, and especially true, I would say, for first-time founders and people, young people coming out of IIMB and so on. Often, I find people asking me a question saying, "How do I do this? Right? How do I get an intro to you?" Right? And my answer usually is that if you can't get an intro to me, right? I'm an IIM Bangalore alumnus, and if you can't get an intro to me, you're going to find it very hard to build a company. And so it should be that is a basic test of resourcefulness. And then over a period of time, you are, because you need to generate all kinds of resources from thin air. You need to go generate capital, you need to go generate your first team, you need to go generate your first set of customers. So it takes extraordinarily high level of resourcefulness. So curiosity, resourcefulness. The third is what for me is situational intelligence and context specific intelligence, because you can have very high IQ, But in order to influence people, in order to sell people, in order to get people to do what you want, in order to make decisions, you need that context-specific intelligence, where you're able to generate choices and then make the right choices over a period of time. The last is obviously risk-taking ability and so on. But it's also risk-taking is different from risk-seeking, and these are a little bit different. And often I see a lot of risk-seeking behavior versus risk-taking behavior is, can I take this risk and I get the right reward, and how do I actually mitigate those risks?
Right. Three things you mentioned: curiosity, resourcefulness, and contextual awareness, or IQ, situational awareness.
Situational intelligence.
Intelligence. So, how would one demonstrate this? Any incidents from your life or anybody else's life where they have demonstrated this kind of either curiosity or resourcefulness or intelligence that comes to your mind?
Curiosity is actually pretty easy to judge.
Curiosity, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to judge. And usually when you're speaking to people and let's say you say something which is potentially different from what they know or what they think, highly curious people will immediately say, hey, you said something, what is that? They will usually take it down, and then they will go and actually go back and go into a rabbit hole, which actually takes them down that particular idea, trend line, and so on. And highly curious people are usually seeing very simple things around them, and that's why you will see Newton famously seeing an apple fall down, which all of us see every day, but really thinking very deeply about the physics of it, right? So highly curious people are finding things that are amazing to them, right, all around them. And founders in some way are that, right? So they find a pain point, and they're like, why didn't somebody solve it? It seems like something that should be solved. Then they figure out, oh, this is a big problem, it's not a small problem, and then they build a company around it. Resourcefulness, again, I think my mother, I think, is one of the most resourceful people I know. She has built incredible social capital. She's from Chennai. I call it the Mylapore Mami network. Mylapore is a small locality like Indranagar. But if I tell her that I need something, she will be ringing the phone till she figures out how someone is in there. And sometimes I use her for reference checks, but she's incredibly resourceful because she will figure out what her network is, figure out what her social capital is in that network, and actually generate an outcome from it. So that is being highly resourceful. And you can see in founder stories that they're able to do this all the time. Situational intelligence, harder to judge, but I would say one of the things that founders have to do a lot is to make a lot of decisions.
Right.
And some decisions are yes/no decisions, and it's a 50-50 coin cost. Whether you say yes or no, it doesn't matter. Like, should the dustbin be here or there? Like, doesn't matter, right? It's a dustbin. But then there are other questions, which is, hey, should I be spending money today on actually above the line marketing and building the brand, or should I be actually building a large sales team? Now that requires actually a lot of situational context, and usually great founders are taking a lot of outside-in input, then generating these choices, and then picking one versus the other, right? Now you can only do this through lots of conversations around scenarios and so on. People who are used to making decisions don't shirk from making decisions in their life. You can see some of those trend lines, but honestly, that is really a life skill that's developed over a period of time.
Right.
I think the one thing I would say is people who are very rigid with their views and find it very hard to change their views often can't make context-specific decisions, because the context changes so rapidly around them. If you're not absorbing the change in context, therefore changing your decision, then you won't make the right decision.
You mentioned that you and your wife were in the same club. What clubs and activities were you a part of at IIMB? What were the activities you enjoyed apart from academics at IIMB?
I would say the thing that I enjoyed the most was actually playing basketball. I don't know if Elsewhere still has a hoop.
Elsewhere does not have a hoop. We have a separate basketball.
Yeah, so Elsewhere used to have a hoop. I played basketball all my life, and Elsewhere used to have a hoop, so I used to enjoy shooting there, and had all these obstacles because there were hedges on the side and all of that. So it was a fun place, and it was pretty much the heart of the the
Right.
campus, so it was fun. I would say that's what I remember the most, both playing at L Square and then hanging around at L Square parties. I think some of my best friendships come from there. Um, and if I don't think if my wife and I hadn't danced at L Square, I don't think we'd be together. So I would say
very cute.
that's what I remember the most. I was part of both. I don't know if FII still exists, which is
Yeah.
Forum for Industrial
Yes,
Interaction.
it does exist.
It's a name that should be changed, but I don't know. And so I was the president of FII, and then I was part of the. It was called ENI Cell then, Entrepreneurship, and is it still called
Yes,
ENI
it's
Cell?
still the same. Yes.
Okay, we had terrible names of clubs, and I think
I mean, we are not the most.
uh,
These
so
schools are not known to
yeah,
be
so
the most
so
innovative.
I was part of that, especially my first year. In the second year, because I was this president of FI, I had too much going on in order to do anything else. And then other than that, I was mostly hanging out with friends and so on, and doing things that most people are doing, which is juggling all the social activities, all the academic activities, and then trying to figure out how many bullet points can you get in the shortest period of time, which is a rat race. So that was, I wouldn't say my V school life was extraordinarily different from anyone else's.
It was happening. I think L Square has changed quite a bit from your time. It doesn't have basketball hoop, and it's maybe not the center anymore. But yes, a lot of gatherings and events still do happen at L Square, and our alumni newsletter is called L Square.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So and our batches are a lot smaller. How big are the batches now?
they are very big.
Okay.
Very big, 600.
Yeah. So I think my batch was 180 or 210. I'm forgetting now. I think that those are the last of the small batches, I think.
So funny story. Yesterday, the founding batch of IIMB was on campus.
Yeah.
They were a very small batch of less than 50 people.
Yeah.
And very few of them could make it to campus, around 7-8 of them. So the batch size at IIMB has definitely increased. We have two new hostels now. In fact,
Yeah.
U and R blocks, which probably did not exist when you were there. Was
Yeah.
it till J or was it till?
So yeah, so we had it till J, but I think in our second year we started getting that new block.
The new
which is
block construction
K
has
and
started.
K and L. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
K to P
Yeah.
are the new blocks. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I would like to talk about AI, the buzzword.
Sure.
How much of it is fluff? How much of it is real? I know that Z47 invests in a lot of companies that have AI as a product itself.
Yeah.
A lot of them probably use AI not as a product, but they
Yeah.
incorporate AI. How much of it is real? How much of Gen AI is real specifically?
Yeah.
And where do you see the future going?
Let me first start with saying I think this is likely the single biggest trend line that
You
we're going to
believe
see that we're going to see in our lifetime, because it's actually truly can be transformational for everything around us. Is that transformation, has it already happened in the last 6 months? It hasn't, because these kind of life and industry transformations take like a decade.
Of course.
Even something like going from on-prem to cloud is
Yes.
still a transition that is happening.
Yes.
Even though that started late, call it 2010, right? So these transitions take time, but is it going to be one of the single biggest influences potentially in the history of the world? I think it is going to be, right? It is going to be that. Now today, in terms of investments that we are making and so on, how much is, as you call it fluff, but essentially where the hype cycle and the promise is ahead of reality, a lot of it, where the hype cycle is ahead of the reality. But I would say there is reality, and that reality has tremendous utility. Now, one of the things that we struggled with, at least at our firm, with essentially investing in Web3 and crypto, is that we struggled to find massive utility apart from the store of value, which we were a little bit late to that thesis. But to really find the tremendous utility in smart contracts and then timing for that adoption, we couldn't get our arms around it. So we made a few investments, mostly I would say more dev tools oriented towards that, but we didn't make large investments. Whereas here, we can see that the utility has direct application, and therefore we're making much larger investments in that. So, for example, we have a company called Atomic Work. It's essentially going after the ITSM or ServiceNow space. We can see already in sort of version 1 of the product, in sort of IT service workflows, you can actually get to 70% automation. Now, that's a big deal for an org which is thousands of people or tens of thousands of people, and actually have very large number of IT service tickets coming. So you can actually get to a level of automation pretty quickly, and therefore people are adopting that very quickly. Now there's obviously a large amount of dollars going into building different types of frontier models. We also invested in one with Krutrim, but there I would say the largest opportunity is in providing the AI cloud for India, and that's a huge problem because with the second largest data set in the world and potential for very different unique models and applications that could be built on top of that data set, and the fact that overall the web is under indexed on Indian languages and truly Indian knowledge and Indian data. I think there's an opportunity there. Finally, India has capital, resources, talent to actually go after a current technology trend line, which could be transformational for the country, and there's enough will in the country to make that happen. So I'm pretty excited about that entire India AI thesis. It's probably going to start with an AI sovereign cloud, which we need, and then go from there.
Okay, you talked about that you couldn't time smart contracts and find applications for blockchain apart from as a store of value. Now, do you think that technology has matured enough? Now, the latest.
Honestly, I'm not the right person to talk about it. But I know, for example, my partner colleague Akash spends a lot of time there. I know some of that has matured. From a CBDC perspective, especially for India, I think it's one application where it's immediately poised because we need that, and it's lower cost in terms of processing, especially in India, than real money is, and therefore you have applications. It has applications in cross-border, which is actually a big trend line for the country. So I can see that some of this is happening, but I would say when you think of the applications that AI has versus applications that smart contracts plus alternate source of money have, I think this AI trend line is massive, right? It's like the last thing that you can potentially compare it to is the transition to mobile and mobile computing, right? That's the transition, which all of our lives are completely different from what they were in 2002, 2005 because of just that one transition.
What are some skills that you would look for, or any potential employer would look for in a graduate from a business school? What are some skills that in the next 3 months, 4 months, students can develop to be job ready in today's job market?
I think it's a hard one. I think different companies look for different things depending on what they're hiring for. I don't think it's sort of consistent, but at least for me,
Z47.
Yeah, so at least for me, the thing that I still rate the highest for people is that high degree of curiosity, and because at Z47 we are actually trying to figure out what is happening which is new in the world. We're trying to figure out what makes people tick and what makes founders tick, and so therefore you need to have a very high degree of curiosity, not just about what's happening in the world, but what's also happening with people, right? How are those people actually growing over a period of time? Because that's usually the forward bet that we are taking, which is a forward bet on sort of a technology trend line or something interesting on a business trend line, and then a forward bet on those people. So that's the first thing that we look for. The second thing, for me, is actually a growth mindset, because when we're hiring people, I'm actually taking a bet on that person going through a tremendous personal growth journey. And that can only happen if they have what I don't know if you've read this book, Carol Dweck, which is called Mindset. It's one of the formative books for. So it's a phenomenal book, and I would recommend it to especially to students. I read it a little bit later in life, but it is essentially a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And a growth mindset is constantly taking stimulus and then sort of growing, and that's what you see with people who are on these personal growth journeys. And I'm looking for those types of individuals, because then I know as the business grows, they are going to grow with the business, and they can essentially become partners in a short period of time, and so on. That's, I would say, is the second thing. The third, and it's part of the growth mindset, but I actually call it out separately, is intellectual honesty. Being able to own up to mistakes, being able to actually look within yourself on things that you're doing wrong. That feeds into growth mindset, but especially in investing, it's incredibly important, because most of the time you have very little information, and I constantly know that most of my decisions are wrong because I have such little information. But if I don't correct for those decisions and I hold on to them rigidly, then I'm going to compound those mistakes. And so the corollary to not having intellectual honesty is that because you can't own up your mistakes, you can't grow. So that's, I would say, is something that is incredibly important to me.
Avoiding that catch-22 type situation is important. So, you talked about this one book. Is there any other book, movie, TV show, or any other form of media that inspires you or you would recommend to students? Something that's close to you.
I think the two books that I usually tell most folks to read is this book on mindset. And I think I'm getting the name of the author right, Carol Dweck, and another one called Grit, which is essentially a book by Angela Duckworth. I think I'm getting that name right. And so, if you look at most successful people in the world, it's some mix of, before people used to say it's a mix of curiosity and grit, which actually defines success. Today, I think most empirical data is this growth mindset, which actually has curiosity, intellectual honesty, a bunch of things sort of imbibed in it. That growth mindset plus grit, which is you don't give up at the first sign of failure. I think those two things usually define highly successful people. So I would recommend both of these. Right now, nudged by someone close to me, I'm actually doing an Indian history deep dive, because I just realized that a lot of Indian history was written by non-Indians, and therefore our version of Indian history, or what you remember having learned in school and so on, is just a very there's no other way to say it, but a colonial version of Indian history. And even the way us as Indians wrote it was different because of just the fact that we were coming out of that out of that mindset. But now I think people are truly exploring some of the origins of India and so on. It's fascinating. So I'm sort of going down that deep dive. I'll confess it was nudged by one of our founders, who essentially gave me a pop quiz, and I realized I didn't know anything. So, and then I ended up going down that deep dive. So that's what I'm reading right now.
So would you recommend anything in that area?
Sanjeev Sanyal, who's I don't I think he's obviously part of the government, so that has some connotations and so on. But I think some of his books are phenomenal.
Right. You talked about this mindset, this growth mindset, and having this mindset to be successful in your career is important. And earlier we were talking about the mindset of students, that a lot of them have this certain attitude towards certain jobs. For example, that startups come on day 2, day 3. What is your suggestion to students for changes in their attitudinal beliefs? What should they be reading? What should they be believing in about the future of jobs, about the future of markets, about their own future? That what would get them success in their career, if not going down the beaten path, going down the predictable path?
Honestly, it's a very hard one to answer. And Um, my number one advice is to truly do some level of interest. One is to explore a lot more, because unless you explore and throw yourself into different situations and different businesses and different projects, you're not going to discover who you are. So throw yourself with and giving it everything into some of these things, because you'll discover what are areas of interest and so on. And then introspect a lot on what really ticked for you, and what really clicked for you and what makes you tick. I think the more you do some of that, you will realize what's a good fit, and then be truly honest with yourself that this is a good fit for you. And then over a period of time, hopefully you'll discover something that you're deeply passionate about. It's not going to happen in the first thing. Now, the reason I'm saying it's very hard to do is because I also know the environment on campus. There's so much noise,
Yes.
right? There's so much pressure in terms of the fact that you want to make most of your 2 years. The opportunity cost of not making it is too high,
Yes.
and all of that. But I firmly believe that if you actually spend those 2 years really exploring what you're and finding something that you really like, I think you can be on a very different trajectory. I'll give you an example of someone. By the way, he's a batchmate of mine. His name is Sri Krishnan Ganesan. You should have him on this podcast. He's a founder of a company called Rocket Lane today, along with his two co-founders. And I've invested in him, and I'm on his board now. But Sri, when he was on campus, he was determined, and he was a fresher, and he had come right out of school. He was probably one of the two youngest people in our batch, and he looked like that. And he essentially said that there's some, I'm not going to, I want to be a product manager, and I'm only going to sit for some of these technology companies, and there were very few. I think Basecom tried to get someone, but I think he took something on campus, I'm forgetting. But then he said, you know what, I want to actually land a product manager job. And then he actually landed a product manager job, and then went from there to actually go into product management. Then he said, I want to be in startups. He ended up at a startup that didn't do as well. And then along with these two co-founders actually started up. I think it required a tremendous degree of conviction from him to do that, and that sort of defined his journey over a period of time. But he was very authentic to himself, saying, this is what I really love. And he was part of, a CAD council, and I don't know if that Sigma still exists.
Yes, it does.
He was always sort of tinkering and trying to fix stuff and so on. And honestly,
had to be part of Sigma if you wanted to be a coder.
the campus wouldn't work without him. I'm sure even now there's stuff that he's built which is still running on campus, but he was just so true to that conviction. That's what's led him to here, right? He sold his last company to Freshworks, made a little bit of money, but now he's building this incredible SaaS startup, moved to the US. So I think you can actually find your areas of passion, but then it does require conviction to actually follow through with that.
That is very inspiring to hear about your friend from IIMB. So I am mostly done with all of the questions, and I think we are out of time too. So any last suggestions for current students? Any suggestions particularly if they want to be entrepreneurs, and in particular if they want to be associated with Z47? What would you recommend?
I think the first thing is IIM Bangalore has won the geography lottery,
Yes.
right? Which is that you're in Bangalore, and some of the hottest startups in India are in Bangalore.
The oldest incubation center.
So it has NSR Cell and so on, but it's also that you're surrounded by startups.
Yes.
And often when I go to IIM Bangalore, and firstly it's phenomenal that you go in and it's green and it's a different city inside.
Exactly.
But I would encourage students to get out of that and be part of the action that's happening in the city. There are so many sort of student meetups, accelerators. Somebody who's really interested in entrepreneurship and so on should be hanging out. We're in the middle of Indranagar. If I go sit at a coffee shop quietly, I will just hear the buzz of startup conversations around me. And there are so many meetups, and I find very few students are actually here, right? So at Z47, we of course host a bunch of our a bunch of events. Right? It's very easy to sign up for these events. We also have a pre-seed affiliate fund, DVC, and that also has an angel risk syndicate, and that has even more events for younger founders and so on. So it's very easy for you to be part of our ecosystem, because we're always sort of hosting and some of these deep dives for a lot of sort of founders from IIM Bangalore. You can find technical founders. You can get into sort of founder dating mode, and hopefully find your co-founders there and so on. So my number one advice for the people in IIM Bangalore who are interested in entrepreneurship is to get out and be part of the ecosystem. And I know you have a lot going on, but I also know that if you're truly passionate about this and you want to get going on the entrepreneurial journey, it's not going to happen by you just sitting in IIM Bangalore.
Thank you very much for a great interview. I have one last question. How would you find a co-founder?
I think the best co-founders are people that you have already met in your life. So if you see co-founder partnerships that last, it's usually some deep shared experience that has bound them, and then it lasts over a period of time. So sometimes it's because they went to engineering college together. Sometimes they went to B school together. They work together in a very high stress environment in a startup, and they've seen how they work with each other and see their styles. So that's actually the best way to actually find co-founders. And I always tell people that you've already met your co-founder. You just need to go back and figure out those shared experiences. Why is that shared experience important? Because in the startup journey, you go through lots of ups and downs. And when you're going through a down, that shared experience really binds you together. Otherwise, you break. Right. So that's the I would say number one way to find co-founders. Sometimes you do need to find you don't have that shared network and so on, and you need to find co-founders. I would suggest you figure out projects to work on together and really work on those projects. Test yourself through like very hard deadlines and timelines, and see truly see each other's working styles in action, and then take it from there.
All right. So with that, we will conclude this podcast episode. Thank you so much for having me here in your office, and thank you for being on this podcast. We hope to stay in touch with you and have you again on the podcast and for other AlumCom events that we regularly host on campus. I know that you come to campus very regularly. You've been a part of our business fest as a speaker, and you keep giving talks. Thank you very much for doing this, and I hope that we will be in touch.
Happy to be here, and thanks for having me. I really enjoyed myself.